We had no word for death, for we thought our joys would be unending, Galadriel tells us. But the great foe Morgoth put an end to such idealism. As the two trees of Valinor are destroyed, the elves sail east across the sundering seas to Middle-earth to battle Morgoth's orcs and to restore peace. Morgoth and his orcs are defeated, but the elves learned many words for death, and one of the fallen elves was Galadriel's beloved brother. The orcs are on the run but still commanded by Morgoth's most fervent disciple, Sauron, who Galadriel vows to hunt down. But before she and Thonder can resolve their dispute over whether to go home as the king commanded or press on, a giant bearded snow troll with curved horns growing out of his noseless face begins tossing elves into walls. Galadriel is in charge for a reason. She catapults herself off of Thonder's sword to slice at the troll, then takes it down single-handedly with a sword to the throat and a knife to the head.
Come in here.
We leave soon enough.
In Rovanian, Nori stands gaping at the unconscious figure in the burning crater, when Poppy startles her and Nori falls into the blazing hole but somehow not hot. She pokes the bearded mystery man directly in the face. At first, nothing happens until suddenly, he grabs her wrist and moans. The wind kicks up, swirling around Nori and the stranger. The rocks fly into the air, orbiting the two figures like a strange solar system. The fire is suddenly sucked into the middle and disappears. After a moment he collapses and the fire returns.
That's not who you are. I can't carry him alone. How exactly are we supposed to carry?
Elrond has another trick up his feathered sleeve. He invokes the rite of Sigyn-Tarik and the doors suddenly open. Elrond is hustled in alone, and sees the mines in their glory, waterfalls, green cliffs for farming in streaks of sunlight, and a bustling underground metropolis carved into the belly of the mountains. Prince Durin IV bats away Elrond's flowery language about their friendship to introduce the dwarven test of endurance. They'll break stones with hammers until one of them can do no more. If Elrond forfeits, he's banished. If he wins, they'll grant a single favor.
The elf does.
Did he lose?
Banished. Yes. Understood.
Here we go, elf.
Just as Elrond crushes his first boulder, we cut back to Nori. She finds the stranger drawing designs on a nearby boulder.
Hello?
He turns, yelling, and the trees surrounding them bow down toward him.
I helped you!
You remember me, don't you? Nori pleads. Something in him does, and the world returns to its natural state. Through creative hand gestures and frankly gross snail eating, they forge a friendship. Where is it you're from, anyway? Where do you belong?
I don't remember, do you?
Where are the others, like you?
Where do you...
Are there any others? Nori asks. In answer, the stranger begins drawing a symbol in the mud, alongside others carved into the trees. He speaks in an unknown language, repeating mana and Ur with increasing urgency. Meanwhile, Nori's father Largo is helping to set up a canopy at camp. At the height of the stranger's agitation, Largo's ankle spontaneously gives way. His foot is in a bad way, and the whole camp is anxious, wondering if he'll be able to migrate.
How bad is it? Can he migrate?
You mind your own fire, Malva.
Back in the sea, Galadriel is still swimming, surrounded by impenetrable grey fog, when she hears a bellow. A decrepit raft comes into view, and she is pulled aboard. Galadriel says simply that she was separated from her ship. So you've not seen it? Asks Aemon trepidatiously.
Attacked?
The worm. Before either can get answers, the passengers spot a ship in the distance. Is it Deliverance?
Sails!
Corsairs? It's neither. It's their own wrecked ship, dragged through the sea by the feared worm, an enormous creature with fins that slice through the water. The passengers panic, and one of them shoves Galadriel back into the sea. Each time she comes up for air, we catch a glimpse of the destruction, the worm circling back, its huge jaws rising out of the sea to chomp down on the raft, its many fins ripping through the raft, sending debris and people flying. And then the sea is still and silent. In the distance, the last remaining bit of the raft cuts through the fog, rowed by Halbrand, who pulls her aboard. Once again, the various races of Middle-earth must strike a tenuous bond. Back in Khazad-dûm, that bond is breaking like the many boulders Durin and Elrond are ferociously hammering until Elrond finally forfeits.
The dog may bark at the moon. Take your leave.
Willing to escort me to the exit?
In the Southlands, Bronwyn comes back with bad news telling the people at the tavern that there's danger coming so they should move to safety at the Elven Tower. Her news is met with skepticism. Waldreg won't flee with only her word to go on. He's seen landslides less dangerous than a wayward tongue, and the tongue of a woman who trusts elves is not worth much in this town. But at home, Theo hears mice under the floor. He attacks the floorboards, only to peer through the hole and see the ice-blue eye of an orc peering back. Arendar is still crawling along the tunnel when the spindly shadow of some creature he surely does not want to meet looms on the wall. Rats scurry past as he squeezes through a passageway and slides down into an underground lake. He clambers to shore and watches the surface, ready to strike. He's unprepared for the long fingers that emerge from the roots behind him and drag him away. When Bronwyn arrives, her home is in shambles and there's a pit in the middle of the floor. She finds Theo hiding in their walls, then hides herself in the closet opposite, just as the clawed fingers, raspy breath, and skull-clad head of an orc emerge from the hole to prowl their room. The orc bursts through the closet doors to grab Bronwyn. They fight. The orc is vicious, but Bronwyn and Theo are resourceful and determined. When next we see the orc, it's just a head that she's slammed onto the tavern table as proof and/or pudding, as Waldreg requested. If there are any of you here who want to live, we make for the Elven Tower at first light, she declares, then moves away. In the seas, Galadriel and Halbrand are in the middle of a storm. The waves lash and roil their rickety raft, and they work together to hold it, and each other, together. Galadriel has bound herself to their makeshift mast and tells Halbrand to bind himself to it. But before he does, the raft breaks apart and Galadriel sinks through the water. Halbrand cuts the rope that ties her to the anchored wood and brings them both thrashing to the surface. Near the Harfoot camp, Nori has come to tell the stranger that they're migrating soon, and she can't help him. His strange magic affects the fireflies in their lanterns, and they burst free, spilling upwards like embers from a fire. He gently whispers in his unknown tongue, and they form a yellow constellation in the sky. Nori understands, he wants their help finding these stars. But after the still weak stranger collapses, the firefly in Poppy's palm dies, and all the twinkling yellow lights blink out. In the Southlands, Theo pulls out the broken rusted sword he's been hiding, and as it whispers to him, he sees a glimmer of fire in the shattered blade. Just then, an oozing trickle of blood pulls itself from the wound on his hand and inches toward the sword like an earthworm. As it makes contact, it hisses and sizzles, turning the flicker of fire in the sigil into a blaze. But rather than giving off smoke, it seems to inhale it, turning the smoke to metal, beginning to remake itself in front of Theo's eyes. Just as they escape the town, Galadriel and Halbrand have escaped the storm. They are unconscious on their raft and it drifts into the shadow of a large ship, a mysterious caped figure on deck silhouetted by the finally shining sun. In the meantime, episode 3 begins with a hardly conscious Arendar, last seen being pulled through an underground curtain of roots, is dragged through dirt-walled passages teeming with skull-clad orcs and their captive humans. With an orc hiss of "Foradar," Arendar is chained and tossed into a group of human prisoners who are digging a passageway, exposed tree roots reaching out to them like orc fingers, caging them like gnarled bars. He is helped up by another elf, Arender's cheeky patrol buddy Medhor and the watch warden Revion are captives here too. Screams of prisoners echo in Arender's ears. In the seas, Galadriel awakens in the belly of a ship as if from a nightmare. Saviors or captors, she asks Halbrand. When they emerge onto the deck, the answer remains unclear. Their captain, presumably the caped silhouette from last week's cliffhanger, is taking them to his home for guidance, and he's wearing Galadriel's blade.
One of the Elm obliged to deliver you safely to my betters. They will answer your questions, not I.
To what port do we sail?
See for yourself.
As Halbrand marvels at the waterfalls and carved giants of this new land, Galadriel has pieced it together. They are in the Land of the Star, the westernmost of the all-mortal realms, the island kingdom of Númenor. The boat lowers its sails like wings as it passes through an arch into port, all whitewashed buildings, climbing trees, and sea blue. Galadriel tells Halbrand that these people fought on the side of the elves, who rewarded them with the island. But Númenor broke that relationship, and elves have been unwelcome ever since. This is made abundantly clear by their hostile reception from Queen Regent Miriel, clad in sparkling jewel-toned scales like a fish. Galadriel, so good with a sword but so bad with diplomacy, demands a ship to Middle-earth, reminding them that it's the elves who gave them the island. It takes Halbrand's surprisingly smooth tongue to defuse the situation. The companions by chance will be Númenor's guests while the Queen weighs the request. Before they are escorted away, Halbrand gives Galadriel her blade stolen from the captain. Meanwhile, Miriel asks her advisor Pharazôn about the captain who brought the unwelcome pair ashore. He is Elendil, a guard of noble blood, who has a son, Isildur, who is part of a crew of cadets, working to become a member of the Sea Guard. It's just 9 days before the sea trial, but this may not be the life he wants to dive into.
To that one! Hold him in, Fox! Ordination cadet!
In the Southlands, where Arender, caked in grime and blood, learns that the orcs are ransacking villages, looking for something for their revered leader, Adar, the captive elves wonder if this elvish word is one of Sauron's many names. Has Morgoth's disciple returned at last? The elves hatch a plan to escape, but before they can enact it, Revion defies the order to tear down an ancient tree. His company is given water in return for his show of strength, but some terrible game is clearly afoot. When Medhor drinks deeply, an orc strikes with whip-crack speed, slashing his upraised throat. The orcs laugh as Medhor collapses, still drinking before he realizes he's already dead. Arender takes an axe and climbs up the roots, which now stretch into the pit like pleading arms, and gets a view over the trench to the no-man's land devastation above, trees uprooted, grass scorched away, smoke rising from the barrenness. He touches the bark, speaks what sounds like an apology, then begins to chop. Back to Númenor. Halbrand wants a fresh start as a smith, but he can't have a job unless he earns a guild crest. He finds his mark in a tavern and steals a crest from a mouthy bully. But the mark and his crew follow Halbrand into an alley and knock him flat with 2 punches. Just when we think he's done for, Halbrand jumps screaming to his feet and single-handedly takes out all 4 attackers, including breaking one's arm in close-up. But even he has limits, namely, the tips of the spears from the approaching guards. In the Southlands, friends are all Arender has back in the orc pit, where rebellion has exploded. Revion and Arender kick their chains into orc faces, and during a deadly game of tug-of-war, Arender runs nimbly across the taut chains, leaping off them to take down the ragged sun shelter with one blow, exposing the orcs to the skin-searing sun. Release the ward, an orc commands, and a snarling part dog, part boar, Ulfang creature promptly rips out the guts of 2 prisoners before Arender binds it. The felled tree offers its jagged roots up to him. As he is yanked backward, he sinks one into the leader's throat. Rev-Ion frees his own chains and takes off for home. But as Arender claws his way over the trench, Rev-Ion is standing stock still. He is struck with an arrow. As Rev-Ion falls to the earth he'll now rejoin, Arender is pulled screaming back underground. He is saved from certain death for a fate that may be much worse. Bring him to Adar, snarls an orc. A sea of skull-helmeted orcs parts for a figure that looks more human than orc, wearing a familiar clawed glove on his left hand come into focus. Also in real trouble, Arender, chained in the orc's lair. At last, Adar comes into view, one side of his face covered in a spiderweb of scars. To our surprise and Arender's, he has the pointy ears of an elf. Adar kneels by an injured orc and smiles with what, on another face, might be gentleness as the orc's blood-red eyes open and a final rapturous, Adar, father, escapes his lipless mouth. Adar stabs the injured orc, holding his gaze until he breathes no more. Adar asks in Elvish, where Arender was born. You have been told many lies, Adar says. Some run so deep even the rocks and roots now believe them. To untangle it all would require the creation of a new world. Like a kingdom of evil in the Southlands. Adar gives Arender a message to carry back to the watchtower, where streams of Southlanders are greeted by Bronwyn, who has taken charge.
I've been told runs so deep.
Yo! You can either help me or...
Unsurprisingly for a headstrong mother's headstrong son, who also happens to be in possession of an evil whispering sword trying to remake itself, Theo chooses harder. He goes back to the abandoned village anyway, and is quickly surprised by an orc. Theo holds out the broken sword to protect himself, which bursts into flame and begins reforging itself in the heat of violence. The orc yells to his company that Theo has the hilt.
It's a boy! He has the hilt! Nobody sleeps!
And dwarves working together. Be remarkable. What?
Nothing, just...
Animals are all fled.
There's plenty, slow down! He said he'd be right behind me.
Stop pushing! She must be in a...
Get us alive! We don't find him!
What is it?
Get back on! Not in here! Over there, look!
In the Southlands, Theo attempts to escape his destroyed village. But an orc catches him, and Theo is spattered with blood. It's not his own, Arender has arrived and run the orc through. They sprint through the grey dawn of the forest, and as arrows slice through the air, Bronwyn arrives, searching for her son. Arender holds off the legion of orcs until they arrive in a clearing, bathed in the rose gold of a sunrise, where the orcs cannot follow. Above the charred hole, whispers in the wind carry us to three mysterious figures, pale-eyed and swathed in white. One climbs and places a hand above the crater's singed dirt. They feel something. And they don't look too happy about it.
My lord.
Your arm. How does it feel? I wish
You could feel.
Soon it will be gone. Me, the knew its warmth as well. I shall miss it. It is time.
In the Southlands at the tower, Bronwyn addresses the refugees, a burst of blue against the grey stone.
But if you choose...
I know I'm not the king you have awaited, but if you choose to stand with me and fight, this tower will no longer be a reminder of our frailty, but a symbol of our strength, she vows.
Fight?
But early success turns to mutiny. You will die. I say it'd be better to take our chances bowing to the supposed enemy, Waldred shouts. He calls Theo to follow him and dozens more as they stream out of the tower.
Theo! It's our chance. It's our time. Come with me, come on, lad. Follow me, lad.
None the wiser, Nori and Poppy find Malva to tell her about the footprints. Right on cue, the screaming howls of the wolf rip through the air, sending the women racing back to camp. But they're too late, enormous wolves sprint after them. One leaps at them, opening its dripping jaws to tear at Nori. But instead, it's lifted into the air and tossed aside by the stranger, who now stands between his friends and the animals. He pounds the earth and the wolves are flung away by the tremor. He has saved his friends but hurt himself, a serpent of purple-black winds from his wrist to his forearm. In Númenor, Valandil and Ontimo practice sword fighting under Elendil's watch. He suggests Galadriel offer her expertise, just the invitation she's been craving.
Well, I will keep it strong.
Come at me.
Simple.
We will see who can score flesh, she tells 5 trainees, and Elendil offers a promotion to anyone who can get a point on her. She flits away from Valandil's strokes without batting an eye, then bats away Ontimo's blows like flies. All 5 rush her at once, and she slips through their swords like water without once losing her smirk.
Not your arms. Look. To outmaneuver them. Well done, Lieutenant.
The stranger's daring do has changed the Harfoot's tune, but he doesn't hear Nori tell him so. He's working on a remedy for his wound, magically turning a puddle to ice. The chill climbs up his arm like frozen ivy, and Nori gets hers stuck in the frost. She begs him to stop, but he continues his incantation until she is flung through the air. The memory of his fiery fall to Middle-earth flashes as she plummets to the ground. He comes back to himself as Nori cowers and runs from his touch. Miriel watches, golden in her armor as petals fall around her, not the white petals of the Vala's tree, but the red and pink and purple ones of her people. The procession moves onto the warships, and Isildur, having finally done a deed worthy of Númenor, is part of it. Plus, his father has once again secured him an important job, mucking out the stables. There are 2 other passengers aboard, Galadriel, trading rippling gowns for the armor she cannot put away, and a newly regal Halbrand. They clasp arms, sails unfurl, wind blows and the ship set off away from Númenor's sun-warmed shores, bound for Middle-earth and for war.
We have endured.
Well, we kick off with the most brutal episode 6. Hadar stands in front of a sea of fire, hundreds of orcs holding torches aloft in the night, with the murderous walled reg in the front row. Before this night is through, some of us will fall. For the first time, we do so not as unnamed slaves in faraway lands, but as brothers and sisters in our home, Hadar calls out. War drums and the orcs' guttural growls score their march to the elven fortress, Hadar at their head. But when they push open the doors, the courtyard is abandoned. As the orcs search the fortress, Hadar stares at the carving of the hilt and Sauron's skeletal visage. Groveling to his Lord Father, Waldreg asks, what happened to Sauron? Hadar turns, face as stony as the carving behind him. But before he can answer, Arendar pops up from behind a parapet, like the most graceful whack-a-mole you've ever seen, to fire arrows into the orcs below and into the rope that holds the tower's scaffolding together. He leaps down to the bridge with cat-like agility and takes off. Beams from the scaffolding fly off the tower as the ropes snap. You must move! As Waldreg begs an impassive Hadar to move, the tower finally collapses in on itself, seeming to trap Hadar and his army beneath its crushing, burning weight.
It is beyond our skill to destroy.
Where will you hide it?
No one must know. Not even you.
After a pep talk from Arendar, Bronwyn sends the fighters to their positions and Theo into the barricaded tavern to protect those inside who can't fight. Theo has chafed against his mother's protection and grappled with the hilt's influence. But now, he's a frightened boy who just needs his mom to tell him everything will be alright. While villagers hold their loved ones, their babies, each other, she tries. In the end, this shadow is but a small and passing thing.
Find the light.
Find the light, and the shadow will not find you. She clutches and kisses her own baby before they say farewell. Arendar and Bronwyn share a moment of calm before the coming storm. He presses 2 of the Alfrin seeds she gave him into her palm. It is a tradition among the elves. Before a battle begins, plant one, Arendar tells her. But she knows, new life, in defiance of death.
It is believed.
Arendar places her hand on a tree and gently holds it. The rest we shall plant after the battle is over in a new garden, he whispers.
Is over.
You and I and Theo. Together. When Bronwyn asks for his promise, Arendar's only answer is to kiss her, finally, in the garden they have now. At night as the wind is blowing and a lot of silence. Arendar sees it, pinpricks of fire coming over the hill. The surviving orcs cross the bridge, and the battle commences.
They're headed for the tavern!
The London's ours! But brave, Alf. More a bit.
They return to the sound of celebrations. The villagers have declared victory. But when Arender looks at the bodies, he sees something strange, red blood pooling beneath a fallen orc's helmet. He pulls it off to reveal not an orc, but a man. One by one, villagers remove animal skulls and chainmail masks to reveal their neighbors, friends, fellow refugees. Fires dance on rivulets of blood, black and red alike, spattering the sweat-soaked Southlanders as they realize what this means. Suddenly, arrows whistle through the air from the trees, felling Southlanders left and right, including Bronwyn. Arender carries her to temporary safety in the tavern, where her blood drips red through the planks of the table.
From the wound.
Theo and Arender treat her wounds with those same seeds and a burning piece of wood. But Bronwyn falls limp and silent. For a long moment, they watch her lifeless face. Finally, she stirs. Theo throws an arm around Arender, who cradles Bronwyn's face. She and he and Theo. Together. For the moment, at least. Outside the tavern, the orcs have overrun the village, and an obviously not crushed J.R.R. walks between the flames to the tavern. He asks Arender for the hilt, but Arender will only consider it if he lets the villagers go. In answer, an orc guts one. Then another. J.R.R. looks to Bronwyn. Arender still won't break, but as a blade arcs toward her neck, Theo does. Thunder rumbles as J.R.R. lays his eyes on what he's been seeking. He leaves the tavern with the hilt and a job for Walled Reg, only to find that it's not thunder, it's the Númenorian cavalry flooding into the village. They mow down orcs with chains, swords, spears, and hooves.
Commander.
Magyasi. Volsuvasias. Calathria.
Galadriel chases J.R.R. through the woods. It was suspiciously easy for him to abandon his children. Just as she catches up, Halbrand arrives and trips J.R.R.'s horse, then skewers his grasping, unloved hand with a spear. "You remember me?" Halbrand asks. J.R.R. does not. "Did I cause someone you love pain?" J.R.R. whispers, smiling cruelly. "Eat your tongue," Galadriel spits.
Eat your tongue.
But she wants Halbrand to put the spear down. She needs J.R.R. alive.
First by drinking seawater.
Back in the village, the captive orcs are chained, and Númenorians, their white-scaled armor splashed with black blood, are cleaning up.
I like them.
Valandil has gotten himself and Isildur spots in Galadriel's company hunting down escaped orcs.
Enough battles?
Sweet summer child Antimo has seen enough battle for his whole sweet summer life and will be staying behind to help the villagers. Meanwhile, Galadriel interrogates Adar. She heard that Morgoth tortured elves into new creatures, the Sons of the Dark, the first orcs. Adar has one note, Uruk. We prefer Uruk. She seeks his master, Sauron. After Morgotha's defeat, the one you call Sauron devoted himself to healing Middle-earth, Adar claims. Flashes of the fortress in the snow, littered with the twisted skeletons of orcs. For my part, I sacrificed enough of my children for his aspirations. I split him open. I killed Sauron. Galadriel is not buying it, nor is she moved by his parental care. She kneels to his face, light reflecting off her silver armor, and with deadly calm vows to kill every orc. Before I drive my dagger into your poisoned heart, I will whisper in your piped ear that all your offspring are dead and the scourge of your kind ends with you. Ice cold, Galadriel. But Adar is unfazed. Perhaps your search for Morgotha's successor should have ended in your own mirror, he taunts. Galadriel is only stopped from killing him by Halbrand's arrival, leaving a thin ribbon of blood on his throat. Adar asks who Halbrand is, and Halbrand does not answer. Galadriel and Halbrand share a tender moment by the sun-dappled stream, at least, as tender as either of them can manage. Fighting side by side felt right to them both. Back in town, the villagers celebrate properly. Pipes and drums underscore an outdoor banquet and the clinking of beer mugs. Arendar guides a grateful Bronwyn to the gracious Miriel, who introduces Bronwyn to Lord Halbrand. When she spies his winged crest, she immediately leads a cheer to the true king of the Southlands. Halbrand smiles, seemingly free of his burden. Arendar spies Theo sitting alone, feeling both guilt and the loss of the power the hilt stirred in him. They are a family now, and Arendar trusts him accordingly. He gives Theo the wrapped hilt to deliver to the Númenorians to toss into the sea, freeing himself from its hold. But the weight of it in Theo's hands feels wrong. He unwraps the burlap and finds a simple axe. At that moment, back at the crumbled watchtower, true dirtbag and my sworn enemy Waldreg stares up at the carving of Sauron's face, the missing hilt in hand. Adar had a job for him, after all, and acted as a decoy to allow Waldreg to do it. The hilt is pulling black smoke into itself, reforging its blade from the blood of Waldreg's arm. He plunges the remade sword into the stone, it slides in as smooth as glass and turns. The stones all around him begin to rumble, and the river erupts, spilling over bridges, and careening down the mountain. Just as Isildur and Elendil finally share a moment of understanding in the valley, geysers explode throughout the village as the orcs chant, Yudin. Beneath them, the water crashes through the crude tunnels. They weren't only a way to sneak from village to village, they were a course for a new river, leading to a green mountain reaching into the sky. The water spills into a cavern of angry red lava in the mountain's belly, sending a new river of fire and smoke powering out of the mountaintop. Fireballs arc through the air and crash through the village, exploding the all-too-brief celebration in bursts of red and black. Elendil races for the queen, Isildur calls for Berex, Antimo runs through the smoke. But one figure does not move. As Adar stood and watched the tower crumble, so Galadriel now stands amid the fires and destruction, watching as a wave of black and billowing smoke, shot through with blood red, crawls down the mountain and across the grass. The clouds of smoke blot out the sun, she stands still and swallowed within. We pick up episode 7 in the same exact place. An ash-covered eye opens. Galadriel pulls herself up and into a nightmare. The once green village is a hellscape. Everything, the very air itself, is red. Everything is coated in ash. The buildings are burning. A horse runs by, screaming and on fire. Bodies are scattered across the ground, tossed onto the tables that just moments before held a banquet. Survivors stagger, cough, and cry out. Galadriel calls for Halbrand and Elendil.
Halbrand!
Theo calls for his mother. Neither's call is answered. They find each other in the swirling crimson ash, and Galadriel leads Theo away from town. Elsewhere in the village, Isildur tries desperately to pry Valandil from under debris, with Miriel's help. As they drag him from the ruins, another set of eyes stares lifelessly into the red sky, sweet Ontomos, who never wanted to fight at all. But there's no time to mourn. There are children trapped in a burning building, and Valandil, Isildur, and Miriel tear apart the walls and get them out. Miriel is thrown back by fire and a shower of sparks as the roof collapses in flames, seemingly crushing Isildur below it. Meanwhile, on the green and grassy migration, the Harfoots will soon know their own horrors. While Poppy sings a song about snailing, they finally reach the grove. But instead of apricots and apples, they find scorched trees and the ground black and smoking, more victims of Mount Doom. Sadoc's elders used to talk about volcanoes that would fall dormant, only to wake again when a new evil is rising. Nori wonders if she's brought that new evil into the caravan. While Harfoots pick black and dried fruits from the ruined branches, the stranger runs his hands over the trunk of a scorched tree, muttering words that seem to wake the wind. But they also wake the tree, its charred bark cracks, revealing new life underneath, and the fruits turn bright again, but then it's too much, and a huge branch falls, trapping Nori beneath it. The stranger looks wounded, and Nori looks mistrustful. This friendship isn't healing anytime soon. The final episode 8 begins in the Greenwood. The stranger makes his way through moss and stone and tree. In his head, he hears Nori's long-gone assurance, "You're not a peril. You're good." A branch cracks, and he turns to see a familiar cloaked figure. "Nori?" he asks with hope. But when she blinks, her eyes turn icy blue. She folds in on herself and then unfurls again as the other two mysterious figures emerge from the trees. "But they're not here to hurt him, we come to serve you," the ascetic whispers, "Lord Sauron."
Tulil men noritas.
Back in the Greenwood, the women tell the stranger that his mysterious constellation can only be seen in Run, their home.
To bring you
The ascetic and the nomad assure him, "Every being that walks or crawls shall be your slaves, for you are Lord Sauron."
far to
Methinks the creepy magic ladies doth protest too much, personally.
where you will be no
But as they speak, the elements wake for the stranger, embers circling in the very trees shaking violently.
when you are and cold in your room, being that walks for you, our Lord Sauron.
It is too much. The dweller knocks him out, and the ascetic and the nomad bind his wrists to a tree. A patch of moss moves in the background. It's Sadoc, camouflaged and spying with Nori, Poppy, and Marigold. Marigold distracts the women, while Nori and Sadoc untie the unconscious stranger. But then Marigold stumbles upon the stranger on the forest floor, somehow both tied to the tree and lying here in the tall grass. The ruse becomes clear. The bound stranger opens his icy blue eyes, and his cloak sloughs away like dead leaves to reveal the dweller. The nomad buries a dagger in Sadoc's chest, red blooming across his shirt. Suddenly, the wind kicks up, and thunder rumbles. The stranger, the real stranger, rises and sends a tremor through the ground. The dweller lifts him twisting into the air with her staff and tosses him down, then puts both of her soot-caked hands into the fire and blows lashing flames into the trees sheltering the fleeing Harfoots.
Make him see. We need you. Please just take it.
Nori cannot leave her friend,
Into you.
but he begs her to get away from him, fearing he'll hurt her again.
What you do?
He's speaking in full sentences now. They showed me what I am. But Nori's not buying it. You choose by what you do. You're here to help. I know it. And help is badly needed, as the Dweller prepares to set Marigold, Poppy, and Sadok afire over Nori's anguished screams. But suddenly the fires in the trees and in her hands are quenched. Now the women understand, he is not Sauron. The women of Run are lit from within, turning to screaming skeletons before dissolving into clouds of fluttering moths. But Sadok cannot celebrate, his wound is mortal.
About to go a wander.
He doesn't mind, he'll soon be reunited with his left-behind wife. As the rising sun turns the scorched forest gold, he shuts his eyes against this warmer, truer light for the last time, surrounded by his loyal friends who will wait for him always. The Númenorian ship is heading home. Elendil is below deck, where Miriel offers him leave as he recovers from the seeming loss of his son. The consequences of Elendil's trust in Galadriel have been unforeseen and terrible, but he will ensure that the ends are worth what they have each lost. Miriel allows herself a moment of rest against his shoulder. But it can't last long. They've reached Númenor, where Elendil sees what Miriel cannot, the black flags draped around the harbor. The king has died.
What has happened?
It refuses every effort.
The seen and unseen world seem to
Used enough pressure to fuse the very heavens with the earth.
take will be forward. It may take time.
Perhaps we've been pushing ourselves too hard.
Pushing ourselves to. Supposing we've been using too much force.
Coaxed. Meaning together. Now, if that's true, we've been doing it all inside out.
Back in a region, Galadriel has gotten her answer. On the banks of a river, an open scroll hangs limply from her hand. As if summoned, Halbrand bounds in with the news that the Mithril is too powerful for one object, so they'll make two. But she will not come to see the progress. There is no king of the Southlands, she tells him flatly. The last man to bear your crest died over 1,000 years ago. He had no heir. The jig is up, but he doesn't seem to care. I told you I found it on a dead man, Halbrand shrugs. Tell me your name, she asks, a whisper thick with what she already knows.
In that time.
I have had many names, he smirks. She tries to stab him, but he stops her without blinking. Her ears ring, and she falls. When she hits the ground, she is home in Valinor, where she hears Finrod's voice. Get out of my mind, she spits, but the possibility of seeing her brother again is too wonderful, and she turns to him, beaming. My task was to ensure peace, he insists. But I learned that was Sauron's task as well. This is not her Finrod, he's Sauron's. Tears spilling down her cheeks, Galadriel walks away from the person she loves most. Galadriel, look at me, Finrod screams, and then she's back on the raft, suddenly in the middle of the sundering seas with Halbrand. He only ever told her the truth, he insists, he said he'd done evil, and she told him his future need not be bound by his past. In the water's reflection, he offers her a vision of their future, a powerful pair, Galadriel standing beside the towering, iron-armored Sauron. I would make you a queen, you bind me to the light, he insists. And I bind you to power. Together, we can save this Middle-earth. But Galadriel knows the difference between saving and ruling, and she chooses instead to press the blade to his throat. Behind them, over the expanse of sea, bright blue bursts through clouds on one side, while a furious storm gathers on the other. In his fury, Halbrand's eyes are ringed in an angry red, the pupils only slits, the eyes of Sauron at last. They scream, lightning flashes, and Galadriel is plunged into the sea once more. But this time it is not Halbrand who rescues her, her true friend Elrond rouses her from the river. Halbrand is gone.
Where did we first meet?
Seaside when I was first orphaned. I was alone, a young half-elven boy without friend or kin.
Galadriel! Galadriel! What has happened?
Galadriel runs to the workshop, where Celebrimbor is alone. She does not expect Halbrand will return. She insists that they make 3 objects, for balance, and that they go only to elves. But Celebrimbor needs very pure gold and silver to alloy with the mithril, ores from Valinor. True creation requires sacrifice, he tells her as she looks at her brother's cherished blade in her hand. Perhaps she can finally put it down in the service of what she hopes will be peace. Back in the grove, Nori asks if the stranger remembers anything more yet, but he only has flashes and must go to run to learn more.
What they said.
She asks if Ister is his kind. In your tongue, that's wise one, or wizard, he answers. Wizard, you say.
You're really not coming with us, are you?
My power's greater than our own. In those moments, it's our task to make our feet go where our hearts wish.
Sounds a bit like an adventure.
Our adventures, they must be shared.
I think I've had about as much adventure as any Harfoot could ever hope for.
Meanwhile, the Harfoots are packing up to travel, this time on foot. Nori joins her family, but they drop an already packed bag at her feet. They're sending her off to adventure with the stranger. You're part of something bigger now, Largo tells her. She takes a tearful last leave from her proud mother and her beloved father, her own North Star. Poppy bursts through the crowd to clutch her friend tightly and to make me very weepy indeed. And then Nori is gone, all the way off trail, but never walking alone. As they set their course, the stranger has a piece of wisdom for her. When in doubt, Eleanor Brandyfoot, always follow your nose.
Now that it comes to it.
He may not have a name yet, but that is the familiar and very good advice of the future Gandalf the Grey. Galadriel places her dagger into Celebrimbor's fires to be melted down. The molten gold and silver is poured into a cauldron with the mithril. As Celebrimbor twists and molds the new alloy into rings, Elrond finds the abandoned scroll in the reeds. He rushes back to the workshop, where the beauty of the first 3 glittering rings of power stops his mouth. The rings are reflected in an eye that also reflects the fires of Mount Doom. As this first season comes to a close, a black-cloaked Halbrand treks through the ruined stone of smoke-choked Mordor. You choose by what you do, after all. He is Sauron, king of the Southlands, and, if he has his way, of all Middle-earth. He will seek to rule them all, and in the darkness bind them.